All right. So, speaker tonight, this guy. Uh, I'm an experienced designer with a master's in cognitive science. Been around for a while, doing web applications for folks like Juniper Networks, Equinix, Intuitive Surgical, and Knight Ridder New Media. That's been those are industries including enterprise networking, healthcare, consumer environments, and I've been on. I'm just going to read this because I don't remember it myself. On design teams large and small, this guy, drives for a deep shared understanding of users' hows and whys amongst the product, design, engineering, and other stakeholder teams. He aims to collaborate with everyone to identify the most important problems to solve and to inform and define requirements for those best solutions. If we had a program chair here tonight, he would have done that introduction. We are happy to have more program chairs also. Hint, hint. Okay, let's see. Moving on. Right. The topic of the talk tonight is a case study involving research and design, optimizing a worldwide sales support app. Just a little awkward to say. I'm going to hand off the meeting now to myself. So, hang on while I switch the slides I'm using. All right. Hello. Thank you all for coming. My name is Edwin Lee, and I'm honored to be giving a talk here tonight at BayCHI. All right. Go. Dagnabbit. In this talk, I'll show how an end-to-end UX design approach, from qualitative research to user-centered innovation, led to a revolutionary change in a critical app. I'll say a little bit about who I am and then dive right into that project. As I mentioned, I'm Edwin, and I'm an experienced designer who's designed web applications. I feel like I've said this before, for enterprise networking, healthcare, and consumer companies like Juniper Networks, Intuitive Surgical, Equinix, and Knight Ridder New Media. I have a master's in cognitive science from UC San Diego, and my advisor was Edwin Lee Hutchins, which was always a fun coincidence. He is a cognitive anthropologist by training, and his theory of distributed cognition posits that everything we do and interact with for a task should be understood as being part of the process of cognition that gets that task done. We'll see some reflections of that in the project I present today. One of the most powerful things I learned from all of that was to observe and to ask why. I seek those whys in users, their tasks, and their goals, and I strive to use those to collaborate across teams to identify the most important problems to solve, inform requirements, and shape design vision and strategy. My case study today is research and experience design in optimizing an internal sales support web app. From research to motion design, I designed an app that transformed users' workflows from searching amongst many windows to the app itself proactively collecting, comparing, and delivering deep information that we learned users needed, skyrocketing their productivity. As noted here, my project responsibilities included the gamut of UX, with some product design strategy added in. The project timeline ran 16 weeks from kickoff to release and primarily involved a product owner, 6 users, and 4 developers. Amongst our results were that 800% effective system availability and reduced task times and reduced cognitive load. In a world that places a lot of emphasis on numbers, though, I should make clear that all those results are anecdotal. I did this project while working for Juniper Networks, which was a global leader in the networking industry, providing routers, switches, management software, security products, and software-defined networking technology. I say was because Hewlett-Packard Enterprise has now purchased them as of July this year. Just a little situational awareness. The order status tool was a critical internal app used worldwide by 5 internal groups, external partners, and some customers to track and troubleshoot orders. Key amongst those internal users was our order management team, which fielded questions from all those groups and more. Questions like, how was an order doing? And crucially, if anything was wrong, what's wrong and how can they clear it? On the right, we see screenshots from the existing design of all the various pages about a single sales order that our users would sift through to find and compare the information they needed. As the headline there says, many windows. In a look ahead to the project's impact, the order status tool's existing design and performance limited the team's workflows and work capacity. Transforming and optimizing its UX skyrocketed productivity and helped prevent crashes. Some particular highlights of the new design's results include reduced task times, improved inquiry resolution time, and that headlining 800% effective system availability. An illustrative user comment was that the new design gives me just what I need. I led the UX on this end-to-end project from research and design to launch in about 4 months, collaborating closely with that product owner, those 6 users, and 4 developers. Phase 1 was lots of discovery and remote research with users and stakeholders. Based on those findings, in phase 2, I collaborated with our product owner to set our product strategy for UX success. Phase 3 was experience design, where I focused on users' whys, workflows, and cognitive load. Phase 4 was implementation, and I worked with our remote developers to ensure smooth collaboration, from learning more HTML and CSS to proactively optimizing our communications. The overall goal was simple enough, a better order status tool, but the project involved big firsts that ultimately led to big wins. With this group, this was the first time UX had been part of the team, let alone before requirements had been finalized, so everyone was a little unsure how UX could contribute. I worked with everyone and proposed a plan for UX to contribute at every stage, from defining requirements, design strategy, and of course designing the app's UX and UI, and working with engineering to ensure that the design got implemented well. This was also the first time we would be working with this remote development team. In getting to know each other, we learned that they had some front-end gaps, so I committed to learning enough to fill that gap on our end, so as to maximize the opportunity for iteration and design tweaking cycles when the time came. On most of the projects I'd worked on before this at Juniper, I worked with a front-end engineer. Since we wouldn't have access to one on this project, I volunteered to fill that gap locally. The result of all these big firsts was a bit of a thrill. An app whose design was tightly integrated from users' tasks through to the UI and motion design, one that set a new bar for our designs and added a ton of new, more highly interactive components to our design system. To start off the project, I met with the product owner and other stakeholders to learn about her 6-person order management team. And the tool itself and why it needed a redesign. Their UX goals were vague, so I persuaded them to add research to identify the actual UX opportunities. Just aiming for easy to use just didn't give me anything to actually work on. While there was a draft business requirements document, those vague UX goals meant that it would take some UX research to identify how I could make the most impact. So I conducted 5 qualitative research studies to understand challenges, work practices, workarounds, and the app's technical problems from users' perspectives. I trained on the tool and then explored it, conducting a heuristic analysis. After that, I scheduled time to watch all of our key users do their work and to interview them, going with a cognitive ethnographic approach to try and understand why they did what they did. From the sample question, why did you schedule this particular time to meet? actually turned out to be a surprisingly instrumental question, as it revealed a huge impact of the existing app's unreliability. They scheduled themselves to use the app just 1 hour a day each to split time amongst themselves so as to minimize the chance that they'd crash the app with too many users or too much demand at once. That was a huge just productivity constraint, we'll say. I also set the users up to do a diary study, writing down bits of their work as they worked. This let me get a view on regularities over time that might not have been evident when watching any single work session. And finally, I interviewed our product owner and lead engineer to get insight into how the app crashes might affect or be affected by our users and their usage. Taken all together, the research provided a picture of a typical workflow for an order status inquiry. To answer client inquiries, our users searched for and evaluated information about relevant sales orders. Even limiting themselves to one user each hour, other teams of the default query alone that loaded with the app sometimes crashed it. You can see here that the app could load over 1,000 orders just on opening. Each sales order had 5 to 8 different views, with potentially different information on each and no direct ways to get between them. And between those two factors, users usually opened each of those views in separate windows. This strategy preserved more of their work whenever or if the backend crashed on them. And answering a client inquiry could involve looking at a whole bunch of separate sales orders. With forwarders, that meant users would have 20 to 32 windows open on their screen at a time as they worked on just one inquiry. This guy is the stressed user watching, going through those screens. And to make the job of juggling those 32 windows worse, many of those pages had bad or even no titles, making it hard to keep track of which window was which. So the cognitive load, even just expended on managing windows, was pretty high in answering those typical inquiries. I identified and prioritized 3 main UX issues. Page titles and navigation were bad, the information was scattered across many pages, big searches crashed the back end. I turned those into 3 main problem statements. Users kept getting lost amongst those pages. Users were doing a brute force visual search across all those pages. And too often, users got too big a set of results, both because the default query and user searches just didn't narrow the results enough to stay safe from triggering a crash. Having identified those key UX problems, I worked with the product owner to set our design strategy for addressing them. Always show location and navigation, make it easier to find the information users needed, and minimize crashes. That meant adding context and relevant navigation to all our pages, reducing users' need to conduct that brute force search, and providing ways to narrow both the default query and users' searches. The navigation issues were sort of the lowest targets. I addressed them with common and new design patterns. From the heuristic analysis, the sessions watching users work, and the interviews with those users, I found lots of low-level issues that made users' job of managing their many windows harder than it needed to be. Too many of the app's pages suffered from these issues. Link text often didn't match up with the linked pages' titles. Page titles were often very generic. When you have 4, quote, shipment details pages open for 4 sales orders and their in-page titles all just read shipment details, it's just harder to keep track of which window is which. Multiply that across 8 potential pages for turning to the goal of making it easier for users to find the information they needed. I mapped insights from user observations and interviews, where, why, and how they looked for the information they needed, into abstract models to explore design ideas structurally and to work out their effects. Abstract models are tools that I first encountered in Constantine and Lockwood's Software for Use, and they represent task performance and UX architecture, focusing on users' intentions and whys, contexts, and task requirements, abstracting away from existing task steps and UI. They also importantly encourage visualizing and exploring UX alternatives and ramifications without thinking about UI in particular. Herbert A. Simon said in his The Sciences of the Artificial, quote, "Solving a problem simply means representing it so as to make the solution transparent." One of my favorite quotes, and these models often help me find that transparency. I developed a new task paradigm over a bunch of iteration with the models. Rather than just help users hunt for information, I explored having the order status tool flag, collect, and then deliver it by actually injecting it right into their search results. I did start thinking a little too small, just small optimization steps, but we'll go over that in a little bit, or next. But the freedom and detail in the models that let me explore bigger ideas while still keeping the UX ramifications in view were really instrumental along the way. So version 1, I would just flag the information where it lived. The idea was that wherever on those many sales order pages the information lived, I just highlight it, making it bolder, putting a bright color behind it. But even assuming that we could enable the system to automatically identify the information that they'd need, highlighting it amongst the other informations on highlighting it amongst the other information on the pages turned out not to be as helpful as I wanted it to be. It might help them in their visual search tasks, but they were still looking at 20 to 32 windows. So the biggest search challenge was still the cognitive load of managing all those windows. Making it easier to see it on any particular page just didn't hit the high value targets. They were still stressed out. So the next thing I thought of was to try and just take, assuming again that we could collect that information or identify all that information, we collect it in a new place. But that wound up just as a theory, as an exploration, that wound up just adding another place for people to look. So even though they might remember or learn a new place to look as their first thing, that actually required them to change their behavior, right? Got to remember that new place to look. And that turned out, in essence, to add to their 32 windows. If they're looking at 4 sales orders, suddenly now they might be looking at 36, not the solution I was looking for. So faced with their search results, I would just raise the number of questions in their head. Is this the one I want to look for, or do I want to go for all the pages that I've looked at before? Next, I decided to try just actually taking that information and bringing it to them. This was appealing because it meant bringing the information right to them, and they wouldn't need to go hunting for it. As a quick aside on the power of the models for this kind of shift, in the diagram there, all I really did was extend the boundary of the homepage section just to include the hold status information section. No time spent trying to decide how this would look in the eventual app. Was this going to be a modal, a sidebar? Who knows? No need to decide now. It's just expanding a box. It's just one of the things I like about those abstract models. The design to put the information directly in the search results meant that I was providing users with a default location to look for it. Pick the sales order and the app will show you what you're probably going to need. Of course, if users did want to look beyond that info to the pages, they could, and they might then face that same window management cognitive load as with the existing app. But hopefully, with the system being good enough at identifying the right information, needing to look beyond the search results would be the exception rather than the rule. About this point, I wrapped the diary study, which yielded additional insights, crucially ways to narrow the default query and to minimize back-end demand. Inquiries tended to be about sales orders from within certain windows, the last few weeks, the most recent number of orders, for example, there were tails, of course, to those windows, so that even though most of them may be concentrated within the last couple of weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks might capture more. Also, inquiries often came with lots of clues, like a company name in addition to a date range. But with the existing search being limited to searching just one field at a time, users just couldn't use the other clues in the search form. The study results here reinforced the need for an advanced search and also provided insight into how to order the fields in that search. These new concepts led to new questions. Could the app actually identify and process the right information? 2, how to prioritize it? And 3, how to make the default query useful? How did we deal with these questions? More research. To enable the app to identify and process the information that users typically needed, our PO worked with our users to tease out and codify the criteria and the decisions that guided their judgment. Thankfully, there was enough rigor here to enable us to build that judgment into the app's logic. Having identified a lot of information to add to that search page, which was already pretty dense, I knew I didn't have the insight, even from all the research I'd already done, to prioritize it all against the possible places I could stash the information. So we did another little research project, asking our users to rank the information according to how useful it would be for them. That kind of survey can be a little problematic, keeping in mind that what users say can be very different from how they actually work. But I did try to corroborate what I could with what we'd already gleaned from our other research. The diary study gave us 2 main ways we could define a useful default query: setting limits with a time window or by a number of orders. This was a matter of some discussion with engineering, and in the end, owing in large part to scalability considerations, we chose to limit the default query to a predictable number of recent orders. All the different research threads and the model work led to a combined home and search page as the core of a new experience. That experience would deliver key information to users, and the default query and new advanced search would be optimized for usefulness. The models continued to grow as we added to our list of useful information. To contain all the information, I created a new component that not only expanded itself, but the row in the table in which it lived, a zoom box. I drove the design with a bunch of different rationales: progressive disclosure, detail and context, enabling multiple zoom boxes, and avoiding the need for multiple windows. Expanding the containing row was especially novel for us, so I kept close coordination with our engineers on that feasibility as I iterated. We see here a few examples, jumping from low fidelity in the early versions to high for our later versions. As I finalized designs and as we got closer to implementation, I led that front-end coordination with our new Belarusian dev team by adding HTML, CSS, and CSS animation to my toolbox. That was meant to minimize turnaround time between my attention to detail and the pixel and motion perfect designs that we needed for key components and micro interactions. Normally, I'd work with a front-end developer on these sorts of things, which, as we know, affords a pretty close collaboration for iteration. We'd literally sit at the same computer and go back and forth between, can we tweak this and how's that? But because our new dev team for this project was remote, I thought it worth filling that gap myself to minimize that cycle time. Here's a dip into the micro interaction of opening a zoom box. We start with the default state, which I based on a new dashed underlined action link that I used in other parts of the app. Adding a post-it-like background, both to add a visual highlight and to signify its informational nature. Each table row had a hover state, of course. And when users hover over the zoom box anchor, it gains a border. I'd had to tune it to avoid shifting the link text when the border appeared. And you might notice that it doesn't have a bottom border. That's actually intentional to foreshadow that the additional information would expand in that direction. And finally, on the motion design front, when clicked, the border and background expanded first, then the content faded in. So in the new order status tool, users could see the app without scheduling for their 1 hour per day, could use the app without scheduling for that 1 hour, conduct targeted searches where the app brings them the information they need, and answer most queries while working in just one window, seen here on the right. We achieve this by setting the default query to the 10 most recent sales orders, adding an advanced search, delivering status information directly into the search results, and giving users the ability to drill into them, even drilling into multiple sales orders, all while staying in the context of the other search results. All of that transforms their workflow into one that can answer most of their queries in just the one page, in just that one window, dramatically reducing the cognitive work on our users. The app now had special powers tuned for our key users, which even contributed to an effective 100% uptime for the app. To sum up, my research revealed key structures in our key users' work. I used abstract models to stay focused on the whys of their tasks, and we built those whys and the structure of those tasks into the structure of their tool. The new app redistributes the brute force search and collection part of the task into the app itself, letting users focus on the important part of their work, interpreting the information and responding to their clients. The little cartoon guys are there to illustrate the huge contrast in cognitive load. And the result and the business impact, user productivity skyrocketed. We didn't have any formal feedback process, but we did get powerful anecdotal data from our users. Because they weren't opening, juggling, and getting lost amongst lots of windows, getting the information they needed was much faster and easier, which meant reduced task times. That, in combination with not having to wait for a scheduled 1 hour app usage window, meant that users were able to get back to their clients much more quickly, which meant improved resolution times. And of course, being able to use the app whenever they needed it during their workday meant an increase in the tool's effective availability to 800% of users' former 1 hour per day window. We also got emails from our users with reactions to the new design. One user wrote to us saying that the new design gives me just what I need. Validation. As an end-to-end UX process from research to product launch, I learned a lot from this project. I involved the cross-functional team throughout the process, and that collaboration helped us stay centered on users, their usage, and transforming and improving their work, all built on their whys. Beyond the key outcomes and results we just saw, I saw again that users' whys are essential keys to powerful transformations, and that qualitative research is a goldmine for getting to those whys. Abstract models allowed me to explore the UX problem space broadly, with high fidelity to content, user intentions, task needs, and system behavior without having to commit too early to even low fidelity UI choices. I also learned that flexibility is a key to effective collaboration, sometimes blurring role boundaries, as in my expanding into additional HTML, CSS, and CSS animation capabilities, is the best way to serve the project. Reflecting on the project, there are a few things I do differently now, and those include exploring the design and engineering trade-off around the default query a bit more deeply, and adding more methods for measuring and monitoring the impact of the new design. That's that guy. All that said, our project was a big success, and our product owner had some nice words to say about it and the usefulness of that new app. That's it for this case study. Questions? I'm happy to entertain them. And of course, thanks everyone for coming. there are chat questions, totally can take those. If there are questions from the audience, also ready to take those.
I have one for you, Edwin. Had they made
Charlie
it?
in the audience. Oh, hold on. Let me give you one of these.
And then, we'll get to you. We'll get to you. Yeah. We had it at the same time. But yeah, Charles first, then Erwin, you're next.
All right. Yeah, I had a question about. So there was a question about like people were basically dealing with the fact that the backend would crash all the time, so they kept Windows open, and it looked like, and maybe I just missed this part, but it looked like obviously you optimized it so you could only make one query, and then the backend would deliver you all the data in the query to be able to open the Zoom box, the thing. So was it mostly that you were able to make one query that was kind of the main way you kept the backend healthy? Because it basically seemed like the vibe I was getting without explicitly hearing it was like you were given constraints. They were like, you basically have no backend resources. Was that the case? And so you optimized with that constraint, or were they giving you some backend engineering time to like design it with more throughput?
So the project team already had as part of its mission that they would actually be swapping a lot of things in the back end.
Okay.
So we were anticipating some additional horsepower in the back.
Yeah.
But they were also leery about the experience with the app as it was in its lifetime prior to that, was that it started fine. But because we sold more and more things, just it wasn't prepared bandwidth wise for the demand.
Right.
So they were a little bit paranoid about scaling demand, right? So as things get, they were figuring in the next year, in the next couple years, if orders get bigger, if orders get like much more frequent, then we needed to like control how that grew. So yeah, on my end, I was aiming to control how big those search results would get. So that's part of why we added in the advanced search. So that, if you are searching for how many orders did Walmart send us, right? It would, if you could say Walmart within the last 2 weeks, that would reduce our result set. As far as what went into the Zoom boxes, because those result sets were expected to be smaller, we actually did have the bandwidth to go and like collect all that information and just jam it into our search results.
Nice. So all in one query. You'd have to make it to expand it. It was just
yeah. So it was just sitting there in the search results, waiting for them to say, hey, this is the search result I would like to get more into. And the details would already be there for them. The Zoom boxes also had links out to the sources of the information, so that if they did want, they could drill in further into the like specific view that had that information in it.
Did you find there was anyone who like stuck with the old flow? Like, do you remember if there was anyone who was like, thanks, but I'm gonna keep doing it my way?
All our feedback was pretty anecdotal. So I think even if someone were more interested in like, I want all those windows, man, I don't think that we got any emails telling us that.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so
that's usually a good sign.
Yeah, it's possible, but I found it implausible.
Cool. Thanks.
Thank you.
And the next one, Erwin, you're welcome to shout it out loud. I think it'll come over here, but
I got it.
I don't have any.
You here? You don't have it? Okay. Yeah, I'll translate it because the audio on here. Yeah, I hear you.
So the question is, Edwin, when you started this, did they have any ideas on what they wanted, or did you have to help them figure out what they wanted?
Okay, so the question here is, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. So Edwin, when you started this, did they have any ideas on what they wanted? Or did you have to help that along? Erwin, did I get that right? Did I miss anything? What did I miss?
That's fine. Yeah.
That's correct, yes.
Let's see. They did have ideas about what they wanted UX wise, but those ideas were, as indicated up here, not particularly specific. So they were literally in their BRD. They said, we need this to be easy to use. We need this to be user friendly and intuitive. As I think most of us might understand, that actually is not specific enough. That's just saying, we want this to be better. And that's why I actually convinced everybody, and that's how I convinced everybody that we needed to do some research around it. I specifically had conversations about, well, in order to make this easier to use, I need to know what's hard about the existing experience. And that's also part of how we got to all this qualitative research. It's like, you know what? My advisor is a cognitive anthropologist. I have a bent towards understanding as much as I can. I'm going to do all the research I can, all the research I can fit into here.
Did that answer your question, Erwin? Oh, popped up. Okay, I got a question, a follow-up question from Erwin. As you were developing this, was there any resistance from the staff?
I'll say most of the staff was quite cooperative, actually. Most of the pushback that I remember actually came from trying to decide how exactly to keep our default queries small. And so I think I alluded to it in the presentation, but specifically the question of whether to whether to open that query with a particular window of like, show me the orders in the last 3 weeks versus show me the last 20 orders. Related to the question that Charlie asked, our engineers much preferred, we want a controllable number of results coming in each time they open that app. So last 2 weeks, last 3 weeks, there is far too much growth potential in that, and lack of control in that for them to be comfortable based on what they were what they were programming for the back end. So they specifically wanted, as a bandwidth control measure, let's pick a number of orders that we return, so our back end isn't spinning up for an unpredictable amount of time or for an unpredictable number of results. So that was a piece of resistance, but it worked as a negotiation. We found a number that could have been bigger, but that's the way it goes. The product owner was really helpful in this regard. Like it was her team that was going to be really impacted by how this design was going to be. So she was quite a proponent of like, let's make this as good for my team as we can. So having her in that corner, not that there were corners really, but having her on that initiative was huge. All right. Thanks for the questions, Erwin. All right. Anything else in the room? We got a mic.
Does it make you feel like one of those pickup people?
That is the goal, man.
I couldn't hear as much, Charlie. Could you repeat that one more time? I can hear on the virtual side.
Oh.
Like the people virtual couldn't hear that.
I was saying it.
Yeah.
I highly recommend buying one of these because you feel like a TikToker, you know, like with your doing your interview show with the tiny mic. So yeah, feel very cool. Thanks, Edwin. Got to buy one for myself.
Anytime. I think those were only like $18.
I'm sure they are, and they weigh nothing, and they battery's probably 7 hours
Probably.
with the clip. But important thing is not to use the clip. It's just to like act like you're like walking around with it.
Oh. Let's see. It looks like they're
Another question just popped up. Repeating for the audience here, will they be able to keep improving the system after you're out?
I mean, probably if they have the right heads in the group. I mean, certainly they have the research that I did on which they could base sort of like continuing lines of improvement. You know, if they don't have the right people there, of course, you know, it won't go in that direction. But so I can't actually answer that question. I'd hope they could, but maybe not. All right. Well, if there are more questions, I'm happy to entertain them. But if there aren't, I'll say again, hold on. Where's my little slide here? Thanks for coming. And if you want to get a hold of me about any of my work, get a hold of me as the BayCHI Vice Chair to get in on BayCHI's exciting opportunities. Feel free to reach out. You're all welcome. And again, thank you all for coming.